Hey everyone, and welcome back to Doctor Who Month. Today's video is going to serve as a spiritual sequel to how I became a metalhead video. This video is going to be timelining every single Doctor Who story that I came across since the day I was born that eventually led to me becoming a Doctor Who nutter. This video has been requested a couple times, so I feel like this would be a worthy video to put in Doctor Who Month, considering, yes, I've mentioned a few stories here and there as to what led to me becoming a Whovian, but I've never made an entire video documenting every story that led up to really the creation of this channel in 2016 when it was originally a Doctor Who centric channel. So with that said, let's just dive straight in and rewind back to 2003, where I apparently experienced my very first Doctor Who story. Now obviously with me being so young at this stage and my only credible eyewitness accounts being my parents, the time frame as to when I watched these first Doctor Who stories before Doctor Who was revived in 2005 by Russell T Davies is a bit hazy, so bear with me, but just know that these first few Doctor Who stories that I'll go through, I encountered in the time window between 2003, when I experienced this first one, and the end of 2004, start of 2005, before the Chris Eccleston reboot show of Doctor Who. So on one fateful afternoon in 2003, I was at my auntie's house with my parents, and their telly was on in the dining room, and it was a movie channel, and it just so happened to be Doctor Who the TV movie. Obviously this is a DVD copy that I got a lot later on, but according to my parents this was the first Doctor Who story I ever watched. I have no recollection of this personally, but I trust their word.
I can't remember when it was made, probably 1999. Was it?
96.
Was it made in 96?
Yeah.
It was set in the millennium, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
set as the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And I watched it on TV Gold or something.
You did indeed.
You did it, auntie. You're
Yeah,
very
we were-
unsociable.
Your auntie was when she lived in Sweden.
Oh yeah.
And in her kitchen she had this little square telly, didn't she? It was like the little 16-inch telly we had. And it was
The
showing
square
Doctor Who.
boxes with the VHS
Yeah.
hole in the bottom of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
big square pieces of
Yeah.
crap.
Yes,
I remember having one
Yeah.
myself actually, and like taking like tapes that we'd never use,
Yeah.
going down at like 4 in the morning and just putting one in as TV Gold would play like a rerun of like a Pertwee episode, and I'd just hit record and I'd go back to bed and I'd come back down and I've taped over something that you guys would think was important. Little shit that I was.
Yeah.
This programme was halfway through and we said, look Zach, we're going to have to go now because you need to be in bed by 9 PM or whatever it
And
was.
I didn't want to. You ripped me away from the TV
And you
movie
wouldn't
halfway
go.
through.
And we had to promise you that when we got you home, you would be able to watch where you left it, like getting home and getting to UK TV plus +1 or whatever
Yeah.
it was called. And we did as well because we
We did.
knew it was
Oh,
about
we
an
did.
hour from Steeple and back home, didn't we? So,
And it really was like, you fetch him up and
Quick.
tell him. Fine.
so I'm not sure if you might have missed 2 or 3 minutes or it overlapped by 2 or 3 minutes, but it was
ridiculous, guys. Unacceptable.
But it was
You made me miss my first Doctor Who story.
impeccable timing. I
It
think
was just
like military
amazing.
timing.
It was.
Now apparently I was so hooked watching this that I was really upset when we had to leave. Not because we were saying goodbye to my auntie and uncle and cousins, but because I hadn't finished watching this on the telly. But yeah, the TV movie was the first Doctor Who story I ever watched, apparently. Which is fun because that means that the first Doctor that I ever saw on screen was actually my favourite, Sylvester McCoy, considering the movie starts with him. Fun. An interesting way to start, to say the least. But yeah. Right, because my parents noticed me showing an interest in that movie that we just mentioned, and because them themselves watched some of the classic series when they were growing up, they would try and buy me some VHSs to see if I'd take to it, and that I fucking did. This is one of the VHSs I got when I was very, very young. This is the original one. This is Genesis of the Daleks and Sontaran Experiment VHS double box. And might I just fucking say, this became my holy bible. I would play the fuck out of this thing. And fun fact actually, while watching these two, because they were in separate cassettes, on first viewing I would get confused as to which one I would need to watch first, because cassette 1 had the 2 episodes of Sontaran Experiment and then the first 2 episodes of Genesis of the Daleks on there, and then this one would have the remaining 4 episodes of Genesis of the Daleks on there. And apparently I watched the wrong one first, so my parents had to like Tipex like the numbers on there. So it says 1 on there and then 2 on the bottom one, which is just a fun story. I don't think they Tipex the other VHSs, but it has been a while since I've got them out. But this was one of them, and this was easily my favourite of them for a long time, and still is probably my favourite VHS that I got. Another one that I would actually watch religiously is Inferno, one of my very first Doctor Who stories, and I'm very, very glad to say that it is, because I do love this one to bits, just like Genesis of the Daleks and Santaran Experiment, as you guys are probably well aware. Oh, interesting, these ones weren't numbered. And then the only 2 other VHSs that I still own from that job lot that my parents got for me are Resurrection of the Daleks, and then funnily enough, An Unearthly Child. Though when I was really young when I first got it, this is the one I didn't really enjoy because it was in stinky black and white telly. But I obviously would grow to appreciate it as time went on. But those weren't the only VHSs that my parents bought me. There were more that have either been sold on or lost somewhere. But the other ones I can remember that we had was The Ark in Space, The Horror Fang Rock, Sea Devils, and The Time Warrior. Those were the other VHSs that we had at the time. I wish we still had them, but unfortunately I couldn't find them. So like I say, they're either gone, sold in a charity shop somewhere by now, or otherwise MIA. But yeah, the last little roundup of Doctor Who stories that I got from the classic series before the new series started would all come from one person. My dad had a work colleague that he was good friends with who was a ginormous Doctor Who fan, much bigger of a Doctor Who fan than either of my parents combined. And he heard that his son, me, was getting massively into Doctor Who. And so he supplied me with a few burnt disc copies of Doctor Who. And these episodes were The Chase, The 10th Planet, The Monster of Peladon, and Death to the Daleks. Yes, both stories were on this one disc, don't know why. Then Planet of the Spiders, and Revenge of the Cybermen.
But your workmate supplied me with a few classic stories, didn't he? How did that come about? Did you let him know that I was getting into classic Who?
Yeah.
Because this was a bit before the new series came about, and I'd already had a couple of VHSs of Tom, didn't I? So
Yeah.
So your workmate was like, "Oh, I've got something you might like, right?"
Yeah.
Was it basically just that? You just nattered about how I was getting into it or something?
Yeah, well, I used to travel with him on the bus, you see, going to work. We both used to get the bus together.
Yeah.
So we used to natter about all sorts, really.
Yeah.
Talk about all sorts of crap on the bus to work, basically. Including heavy metal. I think I've told you that.
Oh, really? I didn't actually know that. Okay.
Yeah, so but he's also a Whovian and, Star Trek fan, really. But
Right, but a ridiculous Doctor Who fan too.
Yeah.
Also, side note, when it comes to Revenge of the Cybermen, it blew my mind when I realised that this followed directly on from Genesis of the Daleks, the VHS that I already owned, because I really loved that, and I loved that this followed on chronologically to that with the whole time ring thing and how they went back to Space Station Nova. Not important. You guys have probably watched both, so I don't know why I'm explaining that to you. But it did blow my tiny mind at the time. This was all before 2005, remember? But yeah, all stories that I listed off here are ones that I hold near and dear to my heart because of the nostalgia attached to them. Obviously, to draw attention to the 10th Planet, this was a telesnap reconstruction that he made for me of the final episode, because obviously the 4th episode of The 10th Planet is missing still, or it's been animated now, but at the time it wasn't, and so my dad's workmate, he telesnap reconned the 4th episode of this, which was so lovely of him to bother to do that. But I think that's all to know. The other stuff is just how much I grew to love John Pertwee in this time because of how many I had, because obviously 2 John Pertwee stories were on here, and obviously Planet of the Spiders, his final story, was on here, and I did also previously earn the Time Warrior VHS along with Inferno, but it was just a budding love for Doctor Who that was happening at the time, and this was before the new series. But now we do indeed move on to the new series, so it was around this time / a little bit after where the revival started kicking in, and I would watch them on transmission. And interestingly, according to my parents, I don't remember this, but apparently I didn't take to the revival series very, very quickly. Like, I felt that it was too different to the classic series stuff that I was watching prior. I just find that so amusing. But obviously I would grow to like those stories eventually. And there's a fun little story attached to Series 1 of 2005 Doctor Who that I'll get onto now, because that's the next major notch under my belt of me becoming closer to a die-hard Doctor Who fan. So at my local library, my parents would go there once a week or so to try to get me into reading, because I'm dyslexic and we didn't know that at the time. But what I went for whenever we went to the library together is I'd pick up DVDs, any movies that I'd be interested in, and then also Doctor Who DVDs. The first lot of the new series DVDs would be available in this library, and it would be all of Series 1, and also not long after it would be Series 2 Volume 1, which had the Christmas special and New Earth. These aren't the original DVDs because those ones we got out of the library, but essentially the story goes that, and I remember this actually, every time we would go to the library I would pick out one of these DVDs from the shelf and then borrow it and take it home, and then the following week to return that DVD I would then just pick up the next one along, and then the next one along the week after, and then the next one the week after, and then the next one the week after that, and then I would cycle back to the beginning and get the first one again. And because of how much money I was costing my parents borrowing the same 4 or 5 DVDs over and over, they said, sod this, we'll just buy you them straight up so you never have to get them out of the library again.
Well, they weren't in our local library actually, were they?
No,
they were in Hemel, weren't they?
I think
Yeah.
you watched 1 or 2 that were, and then you wanted the next one in the series.
Yeah.
And we had to go to the Hemel Library on
We
a
had to-
Saturday morning, week after week after week after week.
Well, the problem was they started getting them in our library, didn't they? That's ringing, yeah. Have you got blah blah blah?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we used to have to go in and say,
But you did take out the same DVDs, and we'd say, look, we'll just buy
We'll
it
just
for
buy
you.
the bloody things.
No, I only want to watch it one more time. And the very next week we'd go,
yeah.
And I get the same.
and you'd get the same one again.
I get one of those 4 or 5 back again, wouldn't
There wasn't many of them in the day, was there?
No.
Mostly Chris Eccleston
But we
ones, I
did
think.
end up buying them.
We kept going there every week and thinking,
I know, but he
they? Wasting so much money.
yeah, £2 a week to hire or whatever it was. I can't remember how much it was, and to buy them there was only a tenner or something,
Yeah.
wasn't they? I don't know. So,
Just buy them outright instead of
Yeah.
borrowing the same thing.
Week
Yeah,
for the
after
same
week
price.
after week.
Moral of the story here is if you pester your parents enough, you can get exactly what you want. I was such a ratty little kid, man. Anyway, yeah, so there's that story about the new series. Obviously, around this time, Series 2 of the new series was kicking into high gear, and Tennant was the Doctor, and Billy Piper was still killing it. So I would also be collecting Doctor Who figures. The main Doctor Who figures that I can remember I had, I don't know where they've gone, any of them frankly anymore, which is sad. But the figure sets that I can remember that I did own was a 10th Doctor figure, the really crappy red Billy Piper figure. I remember having a Slitheen and the tiny little walking pig from the Slitheen story in Series 1. I also remember having that Ood set with the shuttle, like the orange shuttle from the Impossible Planet. Those are the main ones, but I think I also had the Dalek Mutant Reveal figure, which I actually have a new copy of that I can demonstrate right now. This is a new version of it, but I did have the original. I picked this up back in the day when it was being sold on shelves, but this was actually picked up most recently at the same convention that I got this signed most recently, my first Doctor Who story, so it all comes around eventually, doesn't it? Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. But as Series 2 was going on, / maybe it might have been a bit Series 3, my parents would start to give me more classic Doctor Who because I was basically wearing down the VHS tapes that I had at the time to where they were practically unplayable. Same with the DVD pirate copies that I owned. So my parents would start finding more wherever they could for me. And I think this was on the same Christmas where I received the fact file version of The Five Doctors and the Peter Cushing Dalek movies, which, yeah, another collection of episodes here that I have a strong nostalgia to and remember watching a lot. I remember watching this like immediately on Christmas Day, that very afternoon after unwrapping it, and what a gorgeous memory of that. Oh, love it. And then I'm not sure when I got this DVD, but it was in the same year, I believe. But it was Remember It's the Daleks. This was also my original copy that I picked up at the time. Obviously wasn't signed at the time, but now it is signed by the Doctor and Companion respectively. And it needs no introduction. This is my favourite Doctor Who story of all time and always will be, I imagine. Now we move on to the books. So, as I was saying, my parents really trying to promote me getting better at reading wherever they're able to. And in their last-ditch efforts to get me enthusiastic about reading, they would discover that Doctor Who do books. Crazy notion. But there are a few things that they would get me. We'll talk about this first. They would start buying me the Doctor Who Adventures magazine, partially because there was a toy involved, so I was very into it. end up receiving these weekly almost between 2008 and 2012 non-stop, which is very, very fun. The amount of shitty little plastic Doctor Who toys that I would accrue over all of these magazines that I would get is honestly immense, and they've probably all ended up in a landfill somewhere by now, but that is yet another piece of the puzzle that would fill out, you know, my love of Doctor Who. So, but more on books. My parents would buy me a few of these Doctor Who quick reads. These are the only 3 that I got. I think there was a 4th one, but I can't bloody remember where I put it. But we have Revenge of the Jadoon, Made of Steel, and I Am a Dalek. And I remember reading these as a kid and really enjoying them. Really digestible short reads for my young dumb brain. Speaking of books, this is another original that I still own to this day. It's this Dalek Doctor Who Files book. This is the only Doctor Who Files book that I would get. I would really, really want to collect the rest growing up, but never happened, unfortunately. But this one was fun. This one was good fun. And then as for the Doctor Who BBC books of the time, there was a line of these books that would come out around the same time that my parents would pick up for me. I wouldn't get every single one, but all of the ones that I would get of these books were in hardbacks, I believe, and I have no idea where any of them went. But this is not all of them, but these are the most prominent ones that I have fond memories reading. We have Feast of the Drowned, The Stone Rose, Resurrection Casket, Wishing Well, and Sting of the Zygons. These are the ones that I would reread the most to my knowledge, but there were other ones. Like, I do remember Art of Destruction and Sick Building being books that I liked as well from this line, but these are the biggest ones for me that I enjoyed. We'll get back onto books in a short while. Around Series 4, Series 5 sort of time frame of the show, I would be collecting a lot of Doctor Who, like card trading packs, and I don't know what order any of these card packs would be released in, because they did come out at different times. But this is my original Doctor Who trading card collector box thing, shaped as a TARDIS, wouldn't you believe it? I would collect Alien Armies, Battles in Time, and Alien Attacks, I think, were the ones I got. I can't be asked to get them all out and show you, because I've made an entire video showing all of what's in this TARDIS here. But rest assured, I collected a lot of them, and I would collect them and trade them with a few of my friends that I would also enjoy Doctor Who with as well, which 2 of them you might be familiar with, Kane and Morgan, who I both went to school with. So around the tail end of the 10th Doctor's era, I was obviously, much like most kids born in this decade of the 2000s, I would religiously watch the Sarah Jane Adventures week to week on CBBC, which, who didn't? You would be missing out if you didn't, and I would love it to pieces. But 2009 would come around, and another Doctor Who spin-off would rear its head. I was aware of it before, but never got to watch any episodes because it was too mature. But Torchwood Series 3, Children of Earth, would start coming out week to week. And I managed to watch the first 2 episodes until my parents completely shut that shit down and realised that it's way too graphic for me at that age. But we'll put a little bookmark in that, because Torchwood would come back into play in this video sooner rather than later. Right, moving back onto books. So this is probably around 2012, 2013 now. I'd still be collecting Doctor Who Adventures magazine, but this would be the first Doctor Who magazine that I would collect, the official DWM. This is the first one that I picked up. I remember the exact moment that I laid eyes upon this. This was sat just in the door of my local Tesco's. Not my local Tesco's, my local big Tesco's. And I remember seeing on the cover this Doctor that I already recognised, because I've seen some of their classic stories already, particularly Remembrance of the Daleks, which by this time I had already grown to love Remembrance of the Daleks to a deep and intense level. And I remember looking at the cover and it saying Unlucky 7, and being really insulted that they would say such a thing about this Doctor. So I picked it up and I read the whole thing, and was just like, what are they saying about Sylvester McCoy? And yeah, this is the original version as well that I picked up all the way back then, and still have, and I'm very, very glad that I do. But yeah, this is my first DWM. Still on the train of thought about my parents trying to promote me reading wherever I can, and them using Doctor Who as a shortcut to do that. My mum would dig up a old Doctor Who book that she owned herself, a Target novelisation of Horror Fang Rock, which, if you were paying attention, I already owned a VHS of this very story. This was a Target book that my mum bought when I think it first came out, and when she was working in a bookstore and it was signing day for Tom Baker himself at this book, and so she got it signed by the man himself. And so my mum passed it on to me and said, "Oi, read this." And so I did, and I really enjoyed it. And this was my first Target novel, and what I enjoyed so much about it is I could like read this at the same time that I had the VHS of the same story going on. So Horror Fang Rock's still one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time. I love it to pieces, I really do. Right, the last two books to really note here, one of them is The Murder Game. Definitely my first Doctor Who, like past Doctor adventure from the old BBC book line. I really enjoyed this one to pieces. But ironically enough, I know this is the original copy that I have, and I know that I've had it a very long time. This is one of the first Doctor Who books I own, but I actually don't know the story as to how I found this. I'm being led to believe that I found it in a Waterstones, but I don't know how that would have happened, because I don't really see Waterstones really selling these past Doctor adventures. But I may be wrong, who knows. But a book that I know where I got it from and when is Nightshade. One of my absolute favourite Doctor Who stories of all time ever. I got this one in an Oxfam bookshop when I was on the hunt for more classic Doctor Who stories. And when I discovered that this starred the 7th Doctor, I was sold. I was chucking my money at them, give me this book. And I'm very, very glad I did, because like I said, this is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories across any form of media, like better than a lot of TV stories in my opinion. So good in fact that I got it signed by Ace herself, who also stars in this story alongside the 7th Doctor. Fun factoid, by the way, now that we've reached this point in the timeline, the 11th hour dropped on my birthday in 2010, which just adds to another episode in the long line that I've been watching that have just got a very close place to my heart, and the 11th hour is definitely one of them. I've obviously gone on record saying that as Doctor Who was beginning its second series all the way through to when it finished, I religiously watched the behind the scenes Doctor Who show, Doctor Who Confidential, because I just loved watching how the show was created, and watching that absolutely blew my mind when I realised that you could earn money, you could make a living off of making Doctor Who, and by extension, films and TV, and if it wasn't for Doctor Who Confidential, I very well might not have turned into a filmmaker.
Which I believe is the beginning of your filming career, in that you used to do little episodes of Doctor Who with the Lego.
I did, and with the
And
action
with the
figures.
action figures.
Dad helped me with the
And
action figure ones,
You
didn't
even
you?
had people come to see them.
I did, didn't I?
You did. We used to
Childhood
have
friends
movie
came
days.
over and
Yeah.
watched them.
Yeah, that was
When
all
they
the
were
beginnings,
finished.
and they applauded you at the end and everything. You used to write out a little script thing.
Oh, an episode list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did actually mention in the video that it's not just, I do have a lot to thank for Doctor Who for getting me into like filmmaking, but it was also confidential. Watching Doctor Who Confidential after those RTD episodes and seeing how it was made, where I'm like, wait, you couldn't make a living off of making Doctor Who?
In 2013, the 50th anniversary of the show, naturally, already sold my soul to the show by this point. My parents took me to the Doctor Who experience. I'd been to the Doctor Who experience before. I'd also been to the Doctor Who exhibition as well before. But in 2013, when we went to the Doctor Who experience on this occasion, would be a very, very special one. I was under the pretense that they were sending me to Cardiff with them to do the Doctor Who experience again, which we'd already done 2 or 3 times by that point, and I'd be absolutely fine doing it a 3rd or 4th time by that stage. But as a surprise, they'd also booked a set tour of the Doctor Who official Tardis that they film on. I even have the ticket to prove it. This is the original Doctor Who ticket from 2013 that I got. So yeah, on this Cardiff trip, like I said, we got to walk on the Tardis set from 2013, Matt Smith's second Tardis, which would later become Capaldi's Tardis. And it was a joyous experience, obviously.
So, it was 2013 that you actually surprised me with a visit to the TARDIS set, didn't you?
Or was that the first time?
Not the first time at the experience.
Oh, okay.
But it was because that's what it
yeah.
was. We were going to Cardiff for the experience, the Doctor Who experience, and then we did go there, and then we were like, right, let's stop somewhere else, and then it was just casually the BBC Wales studios or some crap.
Amazing.
Didn't I fall through the front door actually?
Oh, you lent
Yeah.
it, didn't you?
When we were doing photos outside, I
Yeah.
checked. Where are those photos actually?
There'll be hard copies, won't they?
Well, there.
Yeah.
Can we dig those out for this
Yeah,
video
we
actually?
can
Because
try
I've
and
just
do
thought about that. Because there's one or two of me outside and there's one of me in front of the console, isn't there? Right, somewhere. Those are the only ones I remember that we had. There might have been more.
Yeah. The
Surprising.
security guard was a little bit too late in saying you don't lean against the door, wasn't he? It's only a prop. Please don't lean against.
Yeah, the door's not locked. Don't lean against the wall.
Yeah.
What was that?
And it obviously goes without saying, that TARDIS set is by far my favourite TARDIS interior. Obviously, Shooty's TARDIS at the moment does have something to say about that conversation about best TARDIS, but I'm biased towards Matt Smith's second TARDIS because of the fact that I walked on it, right? But even so, it was an amazing experience all around. Now, these last few entries bring us up all the way to 2016 when I created this channel. It was around 2014 that I started seriously collecting the Doctor Who episodes that you're looking at right now to the side of me. And so we'll go through the very first episodes that I got that I haven't already showed you. I'm not sure what order I got all of these in, but I know that the War Games was one of the first ones. This is the original copy that I got, once again. Dalek Invasion of Earth was another one. The big one. A box set that was a very big deal was actually the Beginnings box set, featuring An Unearthly Child, the Daleks and Empty Destruction. And it wasn't until I actually watched the damn thing that I realised that An Unearthly Child was the same story that I owned on VHS already. As for the others I got, Curse of Fenric, Delta and the Bannerman, The Deadly Assassin, Image of the Fendal, and then the Dalek War box set featuring Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks. Obviously my DVD collection grew astronomically from there on. I'll put a few photos of the different stages that my DVD collection went through. It did move from smaller shelves to bigger shelves very quickly.
How did it feel losing all of your shelf space to my DVDs as my collection was growing massively?
Well, you'll notice there are none down here now.
No, you banished me
So
upstairs.
It,
Well,
felt, it felt expensive because we had to get you shelving upstairs so we could have some shelving.
and it was an interesting experience building that shelving, actually, was it? When me and Dad used, what did we use instead of glue?
Yes, my very, very expensive eye cream.
Oh yeah.
And it is.
We
don't
were
buy many
building that
products
thing
that
for
are
the
really
entire
expensive.
evening, and then we're just like, why isn't it sticking down? And then we look at it and we see, oh, this isn't the
It looked
glue.
very
And it was a
similar.
very tiny little tube because that's all I could
A
afford.
white
But
tube with blue
extremely
with a blue
expensive.
cap. Yeah.
That's all I could afford. Extremely expensive eye cream.
The tube,
And
the
I-
tube
and
of
you
glue
said-
is still in the shed actually.
You were all,
Is it?
you were all
Unused.
frustrated. And I said, what's the matter? Because you were all niggly and what have you. And you said, well, it won't stick. I don't know why it won't stick. And I'm like, so
'cause it's not
have you been
glue.
using that? Yeah, this what come with it. I don't think it did. I remember paying quite a lot of money for
Don't
that
think shelves need eye cream.
But yeah, the rest is history as far as the DVD collection is concerned. Around 2014, 2015 time, I would finally dive into watching all of Torchwood from the very beginning all the way through to Children of Earth and then eventually Miracle Day. And it was a gorgeous binge. I was actually obsessed with Torchwood for a while, so much so that I would name a Doctor Who YouTube channel after it, huh? But speaking of 2016, that was a big year. Ironically enough, 2016 was the biggest year for me as a Doctor Who fan. And no, it's not only because I made Team Torchwood. It was actually because that year I met 3 Doctors and a lot of companions. I met Ace, I met Joe Grant, I met Jamie McCribbin, I met, like I say, my favourite Doctors, Tom Baker and Sylvester McCoy. I also met Colin Baker, I met Liam Neeson who plays K9, I met Deborah Watling, and there's so many more that I'm completely forgetting, and it really frustrates me that I don't have a full list of people that I met at those various conventions that I went to that year.
I always do think Tom Baker was the loveliest.
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, no, Sylvester McCoy
Oh,
was
yes.
actually the loveliest. When I told him he was my favourite
Newcastle,
Doctor,
and he
he-
sat there next to
I
you on
just
that
say we
little
see somebody at
sofa.
Newcastle, didn't we?
Yeah.
yeah, and he was like, because I was like, you're my favourite Doctor. I should have said it when we took the photo. And he takes his cap off and flings it about like he's the Doctor, and takes his cane as if it's his umbrella, and then swishes that around, and he just basically puts on a show for this
Yeah.
kid who's just
Yeah.
told him that he's his hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a joyous
I
experience.
suppose I was charmed by Tom Baker because it was my book. I met him before.
Right, with the
back in
Horror Fang Rock target, yeah.
1977 or whatever.
Mm. Yeah,
About a
you
year-
got him
about a year
signed.
before I met
Was
your
that when
father.
you worked in Woolworths?
That's right. It was,
Yeah,
it was a
yeah, I
Saturday
thought so.
girl. It was about a year before I met you, wasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
And he signed
Yeah.
it, and then we took that book for him to sign again for you, and he was so charmed by that.
But speaking of conventions, the 2 that are most important to complete this story of me as a Doctor Who fan is one of the conventions was the Bedford Who Charity Convention of 2016. And I've obviously been going to that conventions since. You know, I went to the 3rd one with Morgan, I went to the 4th one with Joe, and then I went to the 9th one with Adam.
We took you to the Who that time, didn't we?
The what?
The Bedford Who.
Bedford Who.
Yeah, we met. Yeah, I went with you, didn't I?
Yeah.
For the very second one they ever did.
Was it the second one, was it? Yeah.
It's the very second one they ever did. The first convention I ever went to. Period. And
Yeah.
And the other convention, this was just after I'd started Team Torchwood. I went all the way to Newcastle to go to the Dimensions Doctor Who convention. This was all because Sylvester McCoy would be attending, and I've been dying to meet my favourite Doctor all this time. And so I did. And I also just so happened to met quite a few friends in the Doctor Who community that I would share memories with in the next year or two beyond that.
It was lovely in Newcastle when, I can't remember when it was, but when some YouTubers recognised you.
No, it was the other way around. It was a mutual meeting.
Well, that's what I
We
mean,
didn't
though.
recognise each other. We just kind of all
You all
met
know
and
each
made
other.
friends.
Yeah.
met and made friends
It's kind
there.
of like, yeah, I admire your work, guy. You know, that sort of thing, wasn't
right.
it?
Some of those names being Dr. Forever, South Park Free Gaming, Pitch Skull Black. I also met the host productions. I met the Who Addicts, and then from those meets with those people, I also met a few other Doctor Who friends that I would meet in the community later on. So those conventions and those events in 2016 were big turning points for me. But yeah, the only other stuff to note before we wrap up this video, considering most of what I've done Doctor Who wise since I've started this channel has been documented online, but I want to emphasise that also in 2017 I did go to the Doctor Who experience one last time in 2017. But yeah, that does just about do it for this full timeline video of Doctor Who stories that eventually led to me becoming a die-hard Doctor Who nerd. And if it wasn't for any number of these stories I mentioned in this video, then I may have turned out a much more functioning member of society. So I have these stories of Doctor Who to blame. But I wouldn't have it any other way. But that will about conclude this video. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you if you stuck to the end. I know this would have been a longer one for you to watch. But yeah, that will about do it. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.